Back when I was traveling constantly for work, I spent a lot of nights in budget hotels. As long as there was a bed to sleep in and a shower to use, I didn't really care about anything else. I'd never had a bad or frightening experience in a hotel before, so the idea of danger or running into someone strange never crossed my mind. My perspective shifted after a training trip to a small town. The hotel itself looked ordinary enough when I checked in. The lobby was small, with worn red carpet that felt gloomy, and the air smelled oddly familiar, like my grandmother's house. The woman working the front desk handed me my room key, and I headed up to the third floor. As I walked down the hallway, it struck me how quiet it was. The place felt empty in a way that was hard to explain and a little unsettling. Inside, my room was nothing special. There was a small bed, a desk, and a basic bathroom. Exactly what I expected. I tossed my bag onto the bed, turned on the TV, and tried to unwind. After being on the road for hours, I was exhausted. I took a shower, watched TV for a short while, and eventually tried to fall asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of something dragging across the floor. Still half asleep, I assumed it was the ice machine or maybe noise coming from the hallway. I didn't feel like getting out of bed, so I tried to ignore it. Then I heard the sound again, slow and quiet, and this time it was coming from right outside my door. I reached over and switched on the lamp, then focused on the door. That's when I noticed something small and white poking out from underneath it. Moving carefully, I got out of bed and picked it up. It was a folded note. Inside, there were a few words written in sloppy, uneven handwriting. The message was short, but it made my stomach drop. It said that someone was watching me from somewhere inside the hotel. My heart started pounding almost immediately. I had no idea who could have written something like that. I hadn't heard any footsteps after the note appeared, and the hallway outside had been completely silent the whole time. I stood there in the middle of the room, frozen, unsure whether opening the door was a terrible idea or if staying inside was somehow worse. In the end, I locked the chain on the door and sat down on the bed with my back pressed against the wall. I left the lamp on so the room wouldn't be swallowed by darkness. There was no chance I was going to fall asleep after that. About 20 minutes went by before I heard that same sliding noise again. I locked my eyes on the gap beneath the door, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. Slowly, another small piece of paper slid through, inching its way into the room as if someone on the other side was pushing it with a single finger. I walked over, bent down, and picked it up off the floor. The message on the second note was even more disturbing than the first. It claimed that the person writing it had been inside my room earlier that day, before I ever checked in, and that they enjoyed watching guests sleep in this hotel. The handwriting looked even shakier this time, like the person's hand was trembling. A cold rush of fear spread through my chest as the reality of what I just read started to sink in. The thought that someone had been inside my room, standing in that same space, was impossible to brush off. I scanned the room instinctively, even though I knew no one was there at that moment. Still, I checked everywhere. I looked under the bed, opened the closet, and pulled back the shower curtain, even though I already knew I wasn't going to find anyone. When I was done, I sat back down on the bed, trying to figure out what to do next. I considered calling the front desk, but it was after 2 in the morning, and a paranoid thought crept into my head. What if the person slipping these notes under my door actually worked at the hotel? The handwriting was messy and unsteady, almost like it belonged to someone older or mentally unstable, and that thought made everything feel even worse. I tried to steady my nerves, telling myself this could all be some kind of twisted prank, but it didn't feel random at all. It felt targeted. I stayed perfectly still for another 30 minutes, straining to catch any sound. Every little noise made my muscles tighten, the air conditioner kicking on, the pipes knocking in the walls, even the faintest creak. By that point, everything was making me jump. I promised myself that if a third note showed up, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd go straight downstairs and deal with it. No more waiting. I kept staring at the door, forcing my breathing to slow down. After a long stretch of silence, I finally started to calm myself, thinking maybe it was over. Then the third note came. The dragging sound was slower than before, deliberate, like whoever was doing this wanted to make sure I heard every second of it. Once again, I got up and walked toward the door. When I picked up the note and read it, my blood ran cold. This one was nothing like the others. It said the person was already inside the room with me, again. I stood there staring at the note for what felt like forever. Even though I'd already checked every part of the room, I scanned it again anyway. Slowly, I turned in a full circle, half expecting to see someone standing in a corner or hiding behind the curtains. By then, I could barely breathe normally. The thought that someone might be in the room with me made my chest feel tight and heavy. I grabbed my bag without hesitation and decided I was getting out of there immediately. I went to the door and peered through the peephole. The hallway looked empty. After that, I carefully unhooked the chain and threw the door open. I rushed out and slammed it shut behind me, then moved quickly down the hallway. I tried to stay quiet, but all I really cared about was putting as much distance as possible between myself and that room. When I reached the stairs, I glanced back one last time. At the far end of the hall, near the last room, I thought I saw a shadow shift behind the corner. It looked like someone stepping back out of view. I didn't stop to think about it. I bolted downstairs to the front desk, where a different employee was on duty. He looked half asleep, but when I told him what had happened, his confusion was immediate and obvious. He told me there were only 3 other guests staying on my floor, and that none of them had been wandering the hallway. He said he could move me to another room or let me check out early if I wanted. I didn't even hesitate. I chose to leave and find another hotel, even though it was already after 3 in the morning. Before I left, I asked if someone could take a look at my room just to see if anything seemed off, like an open window or signs that someone had been inside. He came upstairs with me using a master key. When we walked into the room, everything looked normal at first. Nothing was out of place. But when he checked the window, we noticed the lock was broken, and it didn't look old. It looked recent. The employee grew visibly nervous and suggested that maybe someone from outside had gotten in earlier. The moment he finished speaking, I grabbed my bag and got out of there. I drove about 20 minutes to another hotel and barely slept for the rest of the night. First thing in the morning, I called the original hotel to ask if they discovered anything else. They told me nothing unusual had turned up. None of the security cameras showed anyone near my room, and no other guests had reported anything strange happening. They tried to brush the whole thing off, acting like it was nothing more than a strange misunderstanding. But I didn't believe that for a second. I'm convinced the employee was lying. There was something seriously off about that place. Even now, I can still remember the feeling of someone standing right outside my door, watching me. What really sticks with me, though, is that third note, the one claiming the person was already inside the room with me again. That part never made sense and made me briefly wonder if it had all been some sick prank. But the broken window latch told a different story. I had searched every inch of that room. There was no one there. The fact that the window lock was damaged makes me think whoever it was may have been coming and going long before I ever noticed anything was wrong. I never went anywhere near that hotel again. Sometime later, during a long drive to visit family, exhaustion forced me to stop at a hotel for the night. It was late, almost midnight, and the place looked simple but well kept. There were only a handful of cars in the parking lot, and from the outside, most of the building was dark. When I stepped into the lobby, the guy at the front desk barely glanced up at me. He handed me my key without saying much, and I took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. The lighting up there was dim, and almost every door I passed had a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on it, like everyone staying there wanted to be left completely alone. It was definitely the kind of hotel people only stay at when they don't have any other choice. My room was all the way at the end of the hallway. When I opened the door, nothing looked obviously wrong, but the room felt off, messy in a way I couldn't quite put into words. The lamp on the nightstand was slightly tilted, one of the dresser drawers was left cracked open, and the blanket on the bed had a small wrinkle near the corner, like someone had sat there not long ago. It looked less like a clean room and more like housekeeping had rushed through it or just didn't care. I dropped my bag onto the chair, turned on the TV, and started getting ready for bed. When I finally climbed into bed, I had trouble falling asleep. I couldn't stop thinking about how strange the room had looked when I walked in. The more I replayed it in my head, the more unsettling it felt. I also realized the guy at the front desk hadn't said a word about housekeeping when he checked me in. The entire place felt too quiet, too empty. Still, I forced myself to ignore the feeling and eventually drifted off. I don't know how long I was asleep before I woke up, but what pulled me out of it was the sound of my doorknob slowly turning. At first, it was so faint that I thought maybe the air conditioner had caused it. Then I heard it again, a soft click, like someone was carefully testing the lock, trying not to wake me. I lay there staring straight at the door. The room was almost completely dark, except for the faint glow coming from the TV, which I'd forgotten to turn off. In that dim light, I could see the shadow of the door handle shift slightly. Someone was definitely outside trying to open the door. After a few seconds, the handle stopped moving. I stayed completely still, listening and waiting for any other sound. Then I heard something again, but this time it wasn't the handle. It was a soft, metallic scraping against the lock. It sounded like someone sliding a key into the keyhole, which made no sense. No one should have had a key to my room except hotel staff. I heard the key turn, but the door didn't open. A thin strip of light from the hallway appeared through the crack. The door pressed inward gently once, then stopped. I waited for someone to speak or for footsteps to follow, but there was nothing at all. A moment later, the door eased shut again, quiet and careful, like whoever was there had walked away. I lay awake for nearly an hour, listening for footsteps or any noise in the hallway. When nothing else happened, I talked myself into believing it was probably a staff member who had the wrong room and left once they realized their mistake. Eventually, I got up to check the lock again, then collapsed back into bed from sheer exhaustion and fell asleep. Sometime after 2 in the morning, I remember it clearly, I woke up again to something I couldn't immediately identify. All I know is that I heard the faintest rustling sounds coming from inside the room. And in that moment, I was certain someone was in there with me. I was terrified to sit up and look, but I forced myself to do it anyway. As soon as I moved, the noise stopped. Even in the darkness, I could make out the vague outline of a shadowy figure, barely visible, standing over my bag in the corner of the room. My voice came out shaky and panicked as I asked, "Who is that?" A deep male voice answered calmly, saying, "It's housekeeping. Sorry, I'll leave now." I didn't even respond. I was too stunned to say anything. I watched as the dark shape moved away from my bag toward the door, and then I heard the door open and close. I immediately flipped on the light and rushed over to the door to latch the chain. Then I went back to my bag and saw that it had clearly been searched through. I had to sit there for a few minutes just to steady myself before I could even call the front desk. When I finally did, I told them that someone with a key had broken into my room and gone through my belongings. The person at the front desk told me there was no housekeeping staff on duty at that hour. I didn't waste any time after that. I packed up everything I owned, hurried down to the small lobby, and called the police, demanding that they check the security camera footage. Once the police showed up, the front desk worker finally agreed to pull up the surveillance footage. What we saw made my stomach turn. The cameras showed a large, intimidating-looking man pacing up and down the hallways, acting sketchy, stopping at my door over and over again. Eventually, the footage showed him unlocking my door and going inside using a key. The guy at the front desk insisted the man didn't work there and claimed he must have stolen a master key from the hotel somehow. They refunded my stay, and I didn't stick around for another second. I got in my car, drove another 30 minutes down the road, and ended up sleeping in my car instead. That whole experience permanently changed how I feel about hotels. Ever since then, I've never fully trusted them the same way again. Sometimes I wonder if I could have pressed charges against the hotel for negligence or putting a guest in danger, but I never followed through with it. I just try not to think about it anymore and push the memory out of my mind. Back when I was working night shifts for a small delivery company, I'd sometimes take short solo trips on my days off just to get out of the house for a bit. On one of those weekends, I chose a cheap hotel close to a hiking trail I planned to visit the next morning, something I'd later regret. The place wasn't awful, but it had that stale, old smell, and the hallways were way too quiet, like hardly anyone else was staying there. I checked in during the early evening, and the woman at the front desk mentioned that housekeeping had already finished cleaning all the rooms for the night. At the time, I didn't think much of it. That detail only stood out later, once everything started to happen. My room was on the second floor, and as I walked down the hallway toward it, the overhead light flickered. I didn't really dwell on how creepy the hotel felt because I was exhausted. All I wanted to do was eat something, take a shower, and crash. At first glance, the room looked clean enough. The sheets on the bed were tucked in neatly, but the pillow sitting on the chair was slightly crooked. I straightened it without thinking twice and turned on the small TV. After relaxing for a bit and snacking, I headed into the bathroom and got in the shower. When I came back out of the bathroom, the mirror was still fogged over, and the room felt noticeably colder than it had before. I tried not to dwell on it and climbed into bed. There was a dark corner near the small closet, and I kept catching glimpses of it out of the corner of my eye. It gave me this uneasy feeling, like someone might be standing there, even though I knew there was nothing there. Eventually, I fell asleep. Sometime after midnight, though, I woke up to a strange, quiet sound. It was soft, almost subtle, like something sliding across the carpet near that corner of the room. I opened my eyes slowly and listened. The room was dim, with a little light leaking in from the parking lot through the thin curtains. For a moment, I thought maybe I was imagining it, still stuck halfway between asleep and awake. Then I heard breathing. It wasn't mine. It was coming from near the closet. Fear hit me instantly, and I froze. The breathing was slow and controlled, like someone was trying to stay quiet but couldn't quite manage it. I tried to convince myself it had to be the air conditioner, but the unit was on the other side of the room and made a completely different sound. I didn't want to sit up. I was terrified of what I might see. But after a few seconds, I forced myself to move. Slowly, I pushed myself up onto my elbows and looked toward the closet. At first, I couldn't see anything. It was just a dark corner. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The closet door, which I clearly remembered leaving completely open after I checked it earlier, was now partially closed. Not shut all the way, but enough to look like someone had touched it. I locked my eyes on the small gap and listened closely. The breathing stopped the instant I sat up, and that scared me even more. It meant whatever, or whoever, was there knew I was awake. I wanted to bolt out of the room, but my body wouldn't move. I was completely frozen. After about a minute of dead silence, I slowly got out of bed. I walked backward toward the door, never taking my eyes off the closet. When I reached the door, I carefully grabbed the handle, turned it, and stepped out into the hallway. It was empty and somehow even quieter than before. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. I went downstairs to the front desk, but no one was there. The desk phone was ringing over and over, like someone was calling the hotel and no one was answering. I stood there unsure what to do. I didn't want to go back upstairs by myself, but I also didn't know how long I'd be waiting. After a few minutes, the woman from the front desk finally came out from the back room, looking exhausted. I told her that someone had been in my room. She looked genuinely confused and said housekeeping had already gone home for the night. According to her, the only people with keys to guest rooms were herself and an older housekeeper who had left hours earlier. She offered to go check the room with me or move me to another one, but she was so calm about it that it made me start doubting my own senses. I asked her to come back upstairs with me, just to take a look at the room. We went up together. I was expecting to see the closet door half closed again, or something else clearly out of place. But the moment we stepped inside, everything looked completely normal. The closet door was wide open. The pillow on the chair was perfectly straight again. Nothing appeared disturbed, even though I knew something had been different earlier. She checked behind the curtains, inside the bathroom, and under the bed, but she didn't find anything. She suggested that maybe I'd had a bad dream or woken up disoriented. That comment honestly bothered me, but I was exhausted and embarrassed, and I didn't feel like arguing with her. Instead, I asked to switch rooms. She gave me a key to another room farther down the hallway and left me there. I hurried to move my belongings into the new room and locked the door behind me. Before getting into bed, I checked every corner twice just to be sure. I tried to sleep, but the fear kept me wide awake. It was only around 1 in the morning, and the night felt endless. I lay there listening, waiting for any sound that didn't belong. After about an hour, I finally started to drift off. That's when I heard a sound that made my entire body go cold. It was the unmistakable noise of a housekeeping cart being pushed down the hallway, moving painfully slow. The squeaky wheels echoed off the walls as it rolled closer. The problem was, it was well past housekeeping hours, and the woman at the front desk had already told me no one else was working. I sat straight up in bed and listened. The sound of the wheels came to a stop right outside my new door. I didn't move at all. I held my breath, trying to hear everything clearly. Then I heard something far worse. There was someone breathing just outside the door, and it sounded exactly like the slow, heavy breathing I'd heard coming from the closet in my first room. It lasted for nearly a full minute. I wanted to run or call for help, but my phone was sitting across the room on the desk, and I was too terrified to move. Then came a soft knocking sound. Not knuckles, but something flatter. It sounded like someone gently pressing their palm against the door. They weren't knocking to get my attention. They were feeling the door. Eventually, the breathing stopped. A moment later, the cart's wheels squeaked again as it was pushed slowly away down the hallway. After waiting a few minutes, I finally got up and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty and the cart was gone. I checked my phone and thought about calling the front desk again, but I stopped myself. I felt like they were already starting to think I was losing it. Instead, I latched the chain on the door, shoved a chair up against it, and sat there wide awake for hours. My mind kept drifting back to the first room, in that breathing. I kept telling myself it was probably just someone on my floor messing around, trying to scare people. Around sunrise, I finally worked up the nerve to leave the room and head downstairs to check out. The woman from the night before was gone, and there was a man behind the desk instead. I told him everything that had happened. He gave me a strange look before saying something that still bothers me to this day. He explained that they hadn't had a housekeeper working for the past week because the woman who usually handled the night shifts had suddenly stopped showing up. He said that until they figured something out, either he or whoever was covering the front desk would clean the rooms themselves. The way he said it made me feel like he was holding something back, like he was trying to protect the hotel's reputation. I asked him directly if the missing housekeeper had keys to the guest rooms, and he admitted that she did. I left right away and didn't look back at the hotel once. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me that the woman at the front desk had said housekeeping had already cleaned all the rooms earlier that evening, even though no one had officially been working that job for an entire week. I don't know if she was making it up or if she truly believed the missing woman had come in and done it, but none of it added up. The breathing I heard, both inside the room and right outside my door, felt way too real to dismiss. And the fact that the closet door had moved on its own still makes my stomach turn when I think about it. I'm convinced someone had been hiding in that room before I ever checked in, and I believe they were still somewhere inside the hotel while I slept. I work as a house person at a hotel. It's kind of a mix between maintenance and housekeeping. Most of my job is helping the front desk, which usually means fixing things in guest rooms or bringing people extra supplies when they need them. Another part of my job is keeping the pool area clean and stocked with towels, which actually matters a lot for what I'm about to tell you. This happened in the summer of 2024. My boss had just hired a new front desk employee. I'll call her Brianna for privacy reasons. She was scheduled to work overnight shifts, so my schedule was adjusted so I could help cover nights with her. It was a Wednesday night, which at our hotel basically means nothing happens. No check-ins, barely any guests moving around. Emily and I mostly just talked to pass the time while handling our usual duties, and at some point, that led to me heading over to the pool area. At our hotel, guests aren't allowed to use the pool unless they fill out a form first. It lists all the rules, and once it's signed, they're given a pool key. Employees, though, have master keys that open pretty much every door in the building. I slid my master key into the lock, turned it, and the pool door unlocked so I could go inside. The pool has a small storage room where we keep towels and supplies like chlorine and other chemicals. I opened the storage door and grabbed a stack of towels since the rack was almost empty. As I bent down to grab one last towel, I suddenly heard something splash into the water. It scared the hell out of me. I actually jumped and dropped the towels. I rushed back out into the pool area and saw one of our lifesavers floating on the surface of the water. It made no sense. There was no possible way that lifesaver could have ended up in the pool unless someone had physically thrown it in. I scanned the entire pool area, expecting to see someone there, but I was completely alone. I pulled the lifesaver out of the water, tried to shake it off, finished restocking the towels as quickly as I could, and got out of there. I was definitely unsettled. When I went back to the front desk, I asked Brianna if anyone had gone to the pool. She said no. I didn't mention what had happened. I didn't want to freak her out, especially since she was new, and I didn't want to sound paranoid or unhinged. The rest of the night stayed quiet until well into the evening, when I picked up a maintenance slip to check what the issue was. It was for room 675. The toilet wasn't working. I headed up to the third floor and let myself into the room using my key. As soon as you open the door, the bathroom is immediately on the right. If you walk straight past the bathroom, there are 2 beds on the right side of the room. I didn't pay attention to any of that though. I went straight into the bathroom and lifted the toilet lid to start fixing it. Brianna had already told me the guest wasn't checking in until Friday, so I knew the room should be empty. As I was adjusting the valves and the flapper inside the tank, trying to figure out what was wrong, the temperature suddenly dropped. It happened so fast I froze in place. I could feel the hair on my arms slowly stand up. What the hell, I thought as I glanced around, looking at every vent that could possibly be blowing cold air. Then it hit me. There shouldn't have been any cold air at all. It was summer, and not just summer, but a warm summer night. There was no reason for the temperature to change like that. Almost as soon as that thought crossed my mind, the air went back to normal, and the hairs on my arms settled down again. I checked the thermostat on the wall, and the room felt colder than I remembered. That put me even more on edge, especially with the weird pool incident still fresh in my mind. All I wanted to do was finish fixing the toilet and get out of there. I went back into the bathroom and kept working. It couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes before I heard the toilet start flushing again on its own. I let out a quiet breath of relief as I watched the water level in the tank rise back up. That's when, over the sound of the filling water, I heard a loud, solid thump come from somewhere outside the bathroom. I instantly froze. Almost at the same time, that familiar cold sensation washed over me again. My heart started pounding as my mind raced, trying to figure out what could have made a noise like that. I slowly placed the lid back onto the toilet tank and stepped out of the bathroom. As I turned to the right, facing the 2 beds, I noticed the room phone on the nightstand hanging off the edge. But the phone wasn't what held my attention. Just beyond it, in the corner of the room next to the bed, there was a very tall figure standing completely still. My breathing became shallow as I stared at it. I was stuck in the bathroom doorway, unable to move. I couldn't make out any facial features at all. It was just a solid black shape in the dim room, like the silhouette of a character you haven't unlocked yet in a fighting game. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, didn't even seem to breathe. Then, swear to God, it moved. I couldn't even tell you which part of it moved. All I know is that I saw that figure shift. That was enough. I took off toward the main door, yanking it open so fast I nearly slammed it into my own face. I didn't bother looking back. I shut the door behind me and rushed straight down to the first floor where Emily was still at the front desk. I told her I was clocking out and heading home. We said our goodbyes, and that was it. The entire drive home, my mind was spiraling, replaying everything over and over, trying to make sense of what I just experienced. That's when I started connecting the dots between what happened at the pool and what I saw in that room. I honestly have no idea what that thing was. And yeah, I call it a thing now because I realized it couldn't have been any kind of human I recognize. I couldn't make out a single feature, no face, no details, nothing. That realization alone was enough to make me leave without question. I like to tell myself my brain was just messing with me, that it was stress or exhaustion or something explainable. But the truth is, I don't know for sure. Nothing like that has happened to me since, and I'm grateful for that every day, because without a doubt, that was the most terrifying night of my life.